Welcome everyone to the September version of the Forest Park Chamber of Commerce. I'm Nancy Goins. I am the president of the Forest Park Chamber, and I am also with Thielen Associates. A lot of you in the room know who I am. But we are very happy to have such a nice crowd with us today. We have some guests from outside of Forest Park and a lot from inside Forest Park. So hopefully everybody got to mingle around a little bit before lunch and meet up with some new faces, old faces. Real quick, just a couple Forest Park Chamber information. We had our golf outing in July, and I've got some flyers up there if you were not able to attend the golf outing or if you were, and that lists all of the sponsors that were involved. Our golf outing sponsors a scholarship program with the Forest Park Chamber, and we've had great success with that. We gave out our one of our scholarships recently, and I just wanted to share that information with all of you. The recipient came to my office, and she's just darling, a little young girl who is going to Cincinnati State, and she is trying to transition into a four-year school. But the scholarships that we give away from the Forest Park Chamber are to non-traditional students. So usually it's somebody that's going to attend Cincinnati State or a vocational school or something like that. And we've had great success with some of the young people that we've given that award to, and just wanted to thank everybody for their efforts with that. The girl has overcome a lot of hardships. She actually went to Scarlet Oaks, but she is in the Winton Woods School District, but she went to Scarlet Oaks and then is now in Cincinnati State, and I think she wants to be an architect. So we're working with her a little bit. There's some people in this room probably who can steer her more towards the engineering architecture side, and she met a lot of people at the golf outing, and she was very interested in coming out and touring some people's offices. A couple of the other kids that we've given scholarships to, they're still on the fence of deciding where they're going to be and do. So, but that was one success story that we seem to hopefully help, because she was registering for classes, called me. She's really in touch with what we're doing, so she's a good statement for everything that we work for with the chamber and how we are helping shape the future, hopefully, in Forest Park. So our next meeting, we will not meet here in October. We are partnering with a regional commerce partnership, and the meeting is the next day. We will have the Port Authority speaking, and it is October the 16th, Kathy, is that right? Yeah, the Wednesday the 16th, and we will be at Raffles Catering out in Evendale, and we'll have the Port Authority presenting to us that day. So, and then November, Paul, was the business recognition breakfast.
It's the second Tuesday.
It's the second Tuesday of the month there, so we'll have the business recognition breakfast. And then December, we'll have the Christmas party with RCP. So we're really not going to be meeting back with the Forest Park Chamber for a few months at this location. So keep an eye out for your mailings and your emails. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have an exciting panel that's going to talk to us about an exciting project in hopefully an exciting project in the area. So first off, I'm going to introduce Mark, and I always say it wrong, Polinsky? Sorry, what were you like in 5th grade before you could spell your name? I had Niemeyer that I worked with for a long time, and that wasn't easy either. But Mark joined the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Regional Council of Governments, OKI, as Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director in November 2003. Prior to starting with OKI, Mark held senior level positions in the private sector, including CEO of the Brown Publishing Company and Vice President of the CoStar Group. And he has served and continues to serve on many public and private sector boards, and he is the before moving to Cincinnati, he worked in Washington, D.C. as a senior economist for the Joint Economic Committee on Capitol Hill and is the Associate Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Commerce under President Ronald Reagan. He has a Bachelor of Science in Education from the Indiana University with concentrations in political science and economics. And Mark also earned a Master's in Economics from Western Kentucky University. OKI is a council of local governments, business organizations, and community groups with a board consisting of 118 people, of which 80 are elected officials, and OKI is federally mandated and funnels about $40 million in transportation funds to construction and planning projects throughout its 8-county, 3-state region. So welcome, Mark. Come on up. And we also have Matt Davis, and Matt is the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber's Senior Vice President for Government Affairs. Matt leads the organization's efforts to advance the Chamber's legislative agenda in the greater Cincinnati region, Columbus, and Washington, D.C. He lobbies elected officials on key business issues such as economic development, healthcare, tax, trade, transportation, energy, labor, and education. Matt also serves as the director of the Build Our New Bridge Now Coalition, an advocacy organization made up of nearly 200 businesses, labor, community, and government leaders charged with creating the political will to build a new Brent-Spence Bridge corridor faster and more efficiently. While at the Chamber, Matt also serves as the interim executive director of Ready Cincinnati, the Cincinnati region's primary economic development organization charged with attracting, expanding, and retaining businesses for a 3-state, 15-county footprint. Matt also represented the region on the Jobs Ohio Network leadership team and is an ex officio member of the board of Northern Kentucky Tri-Ed, Northern Kentucky's Economic Development Corporation. Prior to joining the Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber, Matt was the Vice President for Public Affairs at the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and Matt served as the Executive Director for the Great Lakes Regional Office of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Chicago, Illinois. Before joining the U.S. Chamber, Matt served on the government relations team at Convergys Corporation in Cincinnati, and he also served as regional representative for Treasurer of State of Ohio, Joe Dieters. Matt received a Bachelor of Arts degree in Public Administration from Miami University, and Matt and his wife, Melinda, reside in Cincinnati with their 2 sons. So welcome, Matt. And finally, to round out our panel, Stefan Spinoza is the District 8 Planning and Engineering Administrator with the Ohio Department of Transportation in District 8. He manages the district's planning and engineering group that is responsible for the planning, design, environmental, and real estate acquisitions for District 8. If you don't know, and people who aren't in the engineering world, District 8 does include Hamilton County, and it's also Greene, Preble, Warren, Claremont, Butler, and Hamilton County. So he holds a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from The Ohio State University and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Ohio. Mr. Spinoza has 24 years with ODOT in various aspects of maintenance, planning, and design. In addition to his duties in the Planning and Engineering Office, he's been ODOT's District 8 project manager on the Jeremiah Morrow Bridge project since 2004. And this project currently under construction, it replaces the Ohio's tallest bridge carrying Interstate 75 over the Little Miami River Valley. He's been ODOT's representative on the Brent-Spence Bridge since 2000 and served as ODOT's project manager for the environmental and preliminary engineering phase. He is also ODOT's project manager on the Mill Creek Expressway project. Combined, the Brent-Spence project and the Mill Creek Expressway project involved the reconstruction of the first 10 miles of Interstate 75 in southern Ohio. So welcome, Stefan. So what we're going to do, if each one of you could start, and Mark, I think you are starting with the opening statements and your agency roles. If you could tell us what you do with the bridge, what your role is.
Well, I think what we do at OKI is we give a regional perspective on the bridge. And over the years, this has now grown into a global perspective. I think the critical question that you probably need to ask is, the Brent-Spence Bridge is located roughly 20 miles from here, and why is it important to this community of 18,720 people? And the reason for that is because for the first time in the history of the world, we live in a global economy. Look at the clothes you're wearing, look at the cars you drive, look at the goods you're trying to produce, and look where you're sending those goods. For the first time in the history of the world, we are no longer involved in regional or national economies that have as a subset of them a global economy. We are all involved in a global economy. Now, this is particularly crucial when it comes to looking at the Brent Spence Bridge, because as we try to get goods to, from, and around this region, we obviously have to have the means to do it, the modes of transportation. And there is no asset in this region that is more powerful or a more direct link to the global economy than the Brent Spence Bridge. It is by far more important to our link to the world than CVG, which, as we all know, is an incredible regional asset. When we look at the Brent Spence Bridge and how it connects us to the world, we have to understand that the bridge is on the I-75 trade corridor, which runs from Miami to Michigan. It is regarded as one as the top or top 3 surface transportation trade corridors in the country. And sitting in the middle of it is our region. And sitting in the middle of that region is this thin ribbon of rust we call the Brent Spence Bridge. All right? It connects us not only helps connect that to I-75 trade corridor, but it connects us to every other surface trade corridor in the world, in the nation. And it connects us to all the ports from Savannah, Georgia to San Jose, California. So that's how the bridge plays an important part in linking your companies, your community of 18,920 people, to the world. And when we talk about this linkage to the world, we also have to remember how important the bridge is to this region. And the I-75 corridor is to this region. Consider this. Of the 2 million people who live in this region, 66% live within 5 miles of I-75. Of the 1 million jobs in this region, 75% are within 5 miles of I-75. So you can see how this is so dramatically important to our local, our regional existence. Not only our jobs, but our lives are touched by this. And as we look at this situation, as we look at how the bridge is aging and how congestion is growing, the bridge was built to handle 80,000 vehicles. It's now handling 170,000 vehicles every day. It was built to handle 4,000 trucks in a day. It now handles 23,000 in a day, okay? So as this corridor, as this region, as this bridge becomes more and more congested and backups grow and delays grow, you can see that we are at economic risk. If the study of economics have taught us one thing, it's that businesses love efficiency. They will move because of efficiency. Because when you are more efficient, you have more productivity. And when you have more productivity, that means that for every dollar you get to the bottom line, you get to keep more of it. So, the Brent Spence Bridge is very, very critical as we look at how we are going to compete in this global economy. Because if we don't act, that I-75 trade corridor, folks, businesses will find a different place to go. Maybe it'll be the I-81 trade corridor, which runs from New Orleans to New York City. Or more likely, it'll be the I-65 trade corridor that goes from Chicago to Miami and goes through Louisville, where they are building 2 bridges. Not planning to build, they are building right now 2 bridges. Businesses looking at the congestion on the Brent Spence Bridge, how it backs up our region, they will move. They will not expand when they have an opportunity to go someplace else. Now you're going to hear a lot of us talking about why we need a bridge. A couple of years ago I got thinking, well, what would happen if we don't build the bridge? And if you'll just bear with me for a minute, we put together a video which shows you what happens to this region if we don't build the Brent Spence Bridge. And I think this little film will be the best reason why the Brent Spence Bridge is so important to the 18,720 people who live in this community. So I think we're ready to go.
For years, the region has heard of all the advantages of building a new bridge across the Ohio River. Every day, the terrifyingly unsafe and deadly Brent Spence Bridge threatens the 200,000 people who cross it. The bridge's congestion is not simple nuisance. Every year, it robs us of hundreds of millions of dollars in wasted fuel and time. Every moment, the world marketplace weighs that danger and that congestion, and commerce is encouraged to move to other regions. So we know well what a new bridge would bring to the region. But what would happen if we do not build a new bridge? What happens is that our roadway network collapses into complete gridlock. The video forecasts traffic volume between 2005 and 2040 during the morning rush hour. It illustrates what happens to traffic if we don't build a new bridge. The red line represents gridlock, and the thicker the red line, the longer you are in gridlock. As the red line grows and grows through the years, the regional impact of not building the Brent Spence Bridge becomes debilitating. By 2025, the entire road network is affected by gridlock. By 2040, nothing is moving on our roads. Let's look at specific parts of the regions and see what we can expect if we do not build a new bridge. Travel time on Interstate 71 between Kings Island and the downtown Cincinnati Business District swells from 37 minutes in 2005 to 137 minutes in 2040, an increase of more than an hour and a half for that 23-mile trip. The trip between Claremont County to the Cincinnati Central Business District on Interstates 275 and 471 grows by more than 1 hour. It will take over an hour and a half to drive the 12 miles from Florence, Kentucky to the Central Business District in Cincinnati. And travel time from one of the region's most important assets, the Northern Kentucky Greater Cincinnati Airport, to the Cincinnati Business District increases from 30 minutes to 104 minutes for this 13-mile trip. So, this is our future if we do not build a new bridge. Every year we wait, it not only adds hundreds of millions of dollars to the cost of the new bridge, it guarantees the region will choke on its own congestion. What businesses will want to locate here? How many of our children will want to stay here when grown? How much will our wages be lowered by an economy that literally cannot move? The real message is we must get going. If we wait, we lose. We lose to those regions that are building infrastructure to meet the challenges of a global economy. So let's get to work. Let's win our future. Let's build our new bridge now.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Matt Davis, who is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of our Build Our New Bridge Now coalition.
Thanks, Mark. Hard to follow that. Good, great video. But I think it really speaks to, so Mark wants to, he identified the problem, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about how we're trying to solve it. My primary job is I serve as the head of government affairs for the Cincinnati Chamber. We represent nearly 5,000 member businesses and 310,000 employees. And as you can imagine, when you have that many stakeholders, you have a lot of different places you have to jump from A to B, and from one foot to the other. So it comes down to prioritization and how do we prioritize what we do. As Mark said, he talked a lot about economic development, and that is, our key mission is to create that environment for businesses to want to come, and for existing businesses to expand, and new businesses to want to come. In fact, Paul and I are talking about a couple of them on the side there, how critical it is, and that's how the economy moves forward. So what we try to do, and we've had, for a decade now, we've been talking about the Brent Spence Bridge. There's been a lot of talk about it, right? Everybody complains about it, that travels it. You think about it at least twice a day, right? If you have to travel it. But nothing was getting done, and there's a couple reasons why nothing was getting done, and we can get into those. One is, for decades, at least a half a century, we've relied on the federal government to fund our transportation, our highways, our roads, and bridges. We now have a federal government that's $17 trillion in debt, that's bankrupt, and we have a federal highway trust fund, which is you pay your gas tax, it goes into this fund, and that's how we fund bridges and roads and all of our infrastructure that isn't meeting the needs. As a country, we haven't prioritized. As a region, we haven't prioritized either. And the whole thing starts to crumble when you don't do that. So 4 years ago, under the direction of former chair of the board, Julie Jansen, who's the head of Duke Energy Ohio and Kentucky, who's now in senior leadership at Duke Energy in Charlotte, she came to us. She said, "I want to do one thing. I want to focus on one thing I want to prioritize. I want rifle shots, not shotgun shots. What are we going to focus on?" So the biggest issue, from what we can tell, is we've got to unlock this Brent Spence Bridge. We've got to figure it out. And Stefan will talk a little bit about it once I'm finished. But if we follow the regular course of order and the lack of dollars that we're getting from the federal government, the fact that Ohio is a donor state as well, we don't get back what we put into the federal government for transportation. We're looking at decades before this project gets done. And as you can see by the video, we don't have time to do that. So we created the Build Our New Bridge Now Coalition under Julie Jansen's leadership 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, excuse me, to build that political will. Build that political will from elected officials in Washington, in Frankfurt, in Columbus, here locally, to prioritize and start coming up with solutions to fix this problem. So our coalition is made up of, as Nancy mentioned, is made up of nearly 200 businesses, labor organizations, civic and government leaders, all trying to come together and say, okay, we're willing to put our weight, spend our political capital, lend our voice, lend our story to solving this issue. I think, so where are we on it? I think we've significantly moved the needle in the community. People are thinking about it. We're here talking about it right now. You've invited us to come and talk about this important project. The president held an event to highlight the nation's transportation needs and pointed directly to the Brent Spence Bridge as he stood in front of it. It's a part of I think the daily news cycle as well. So we've raised the level of awareness, I think, in the community. Now it's time for us to really kind of put our shoulders behind getting done what needs to get done. And what we need to have happen is we need to figure out a way to pay for this. I mentioned the federal government is broke. Ohio and Kentucky, if they put your entire road program towards this project, it would be 5 years or 3 years of all the money that you have in Ohio and Kentucky just to solve this Brent Spence Bridge problem. So we need to find a way to do it faster. We need to find a way to do it more cost effectively too. And we need to get it done now because we can't wait. We can't lose businesses. We can't put our families' lives in danger. Just 4 weeks ago, we had a car flip off the top part of the bridge and land on the bottom part of the bridge. And thank God, everybody walked away from it. But there's this huge safety concern to it as well. And we can wring our hands and think about, talk about it, but we need to start really, putting pens to paper, figuring out how we're going to pay for it and getting it done as soon as possible. So that's what our coalition is here to do, is to build that will. And I think it's certainly a marathon, not a sprint on a project of this magnitude, but we think we're moving forward. And I'll turn it over to Stefan now and look forward to talking a little bit more in depth later.
Thank you both. Again, my role with the Department of Transportation, with our counterparts in the cabinet in Kentucky, is to keep moving this project forward to that construction phase. Mark's video from OKI showed that what happens out to 2040, and that same type of graphic we see happen anytime there's a major incident on the Brent Spence. There was several months ago, there was the beer truck that I think turned over and it basically shut the Brent Spence down for several hours during the morning rush. We have data for that day that shows those same red lines across the entire region growing every half hour. That truck was closing the bridge. So it's a need out in the future, but that need's present today as well. Matt mentioned the safety. The section of interstates has crash rates higher than each state's average, 2 times higher. Since 2004, there's been 22 fatalities on the bridge of the corridor itself. So it's a critical need for us today, not just in the future, as Mark was saying. We've done a lot of work. Like I said, I think my bioscience has been involved since 2000 in some aspects, so it's been a good chunk of my career. We have a solution. We know what we need to build. We've known that since 2011. The issue has been funding. It was touched on. Both states, Governors Kasich and Beshear, both recognized several years ago that to fund this project, we need to bring to the table our traditional federal and state funding mechanisms, but as well as a tolling component. To meet the entirety of the funding for this project, it's going to require local funds, state funds, federal funds, and a tolling component that helps us tap into some private dollars that are out as well. We are currently continuing our efforts on developing traffic and revenue forecasts with that tolling component in place. It was not part of our original engineering and environmental work, so that effort's ongoing. We hope to have some refined traffic numbers in early 2015. With the tolling component that's brought into place, there are some environmental concerns that we have to go back out and look at, so that effort's underway now. We hope to be done with that in the spring of 2016. So at that point, we would be ready to move forward. We are still working with our counterparts in Kentucky on some legislative issues that they have in their state. My understanding is they go back into session the first part of the year, and we are confident that our partners in Kentucky will be able to get the necessary legislation in place to allow us to move forward and put shovels in the ground in the very near future. With that, I think we're up there where we're on.
What?
Sure.
Yeah. What is the what you said? What is the what are we looking to do?
Sure. Well, we focus on the bridge. That's the center of the project. We actually have an 8-mile corridor that we're working on. It basically goes from Dixie Highway in Kentucky through the Western Hills Viaduct in Cincinnati. So it's about an 8-mile long corridor in general, 3 miles in Ohio, 5 in Kentucky. But about a third of the cost is in the southern portion approach, a third in the northern approach, and then a third on the bridge itself. We plan to build a new bridge immediately downstream of the existing bridge. It will have more lanes, wider shoulders, as well as leaving the existing bridge, which is structurally fine, in service and will be rehabilitated, but it will go from the 4 lanes, no shoulders that it is today, to 2 lanes with shoulders. So it goes back to more of the original configuration it had when it opened in the early 60s. Throughout the corridor, we're bringing it up to standards. Speeds will be able to be carried at highway speeds. We'll have breakdown lane shoulders to pull off in. The alignments of the road will be updated, so we should have less incidents in the corridor, so it will improve our safety. The access points to and from the business districts and the region are going to be improved as well.
Okay. So with the existing bridge in place, just so I think everybody has a picture, if you're in one lane, if you're on a lane on 75, you could still be on the old bridge. If you're coming down the cut in the hill and you're on the one side, you could be on that, or if you're in another lane, you could hit the new one. You wouldn't have to.
There will be interstate traffic on both bridges.
On both bridges. Okay, and they just feed straight up to 75. Just depends on where you are. Okay. And what is the anticipated cost for the project?
Right now, we're estimating about $2.6 billion. That's inflated dollars out to the midpoint of construction, which we're carrying about 2018 right now.
Okay.
And that's total cost, design, right away, and construction.
And right now, where are you with the phase of it? You're in the environmental phase. You have a consultant team that's doing that work. Sure. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've completed our environmental documentation and our preliminary engineering, so that is done. We are going back through, as I mentioned, and hitting some of the environmental work that needs to be done to bring in the tolling component. So we have HNTB, one of the consultants on board, working through those issues with us. And again, that's why I said we're hoping to be finished with that here in next year.
Okay. Mark, can you talk about the tolling component? And I know there's been a lot of stories in the news about that with Kentucky. Where do we stand with that and tolls in Ohio and Kentucky versus, do you know?
Well, it's the alpha and the omega. In Ohio, everything is teed up for tolling. You have to understand that you had to pass legislation in Ohio to allow tolling. This past year, you had to allow what's electronic tolling. First thing you understand about tolls on the bridge is you will never slow down to pay a toll. You will just drive and you will be tolled electronically. This is going to lead probably to a pass, okay? that you'll hang in your car. Many of you have driven around the United States, you've run into this. And that pass will allow for commuters, people who use the bridge every day, to pay a much lower toll than what, let's say, a trucker running a 18-wheel rig from Minneapolis to Miami would pay. So the tolling is all set up in Ohio. Kentucky, the exact opposite. A very contentious issue. This has been turned into a, there's not just a rational debate about tolls now. Now tolls have become this lightning rod, the lines in the sand, fire coming out of people's mouths as they, talk about how much they hate tolls. And in Kentucky, we need a legislative solution. Now, I can go on and talk about a legislative solution in Kentucky, but Matt has worked directly on this, and so I'm going to let him talk about it. The one thing I just want to talk about the cost and about tolls is the way that projects like this have been built in the past is the federal government came in and paid 80% of the cost and locals came up with 20. As Matt outlined, that's not feasible anymore. You would have a government that's at 17 trillion in debt, has 77 trillion in unfunded liabilities, and in a few years we'll start running trillion-dollar deficits again. So there's no money for projects like this from the traditional source. But there is money out there, and it's from the private sector. And so one of the ways to finance this is through a public-private partnership. And that is where you go to a private entity and they actually build the project. More importantly, they put the money in up front so the project gets built sooner and cheaper. And also you get to reduce the cost of the bridge. So that's one way to reduce the costs. You bring in the private sector. There's a lot of other things about that to go into, but now the critical issue is in Matt's hands, and it's with the Kentucky legislature. And
That's a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Well, to the delay point, let me. I'll use. I'm going to steal one of Mark's numbers since he put all that pressure on me. $8 million a month is the cost, is the added cost to the Brent Spence Bridge project every month that we delay. So let's just round it up and call it $100 million a year. So every year we don't do anything. We're just adding cost to it. We're adding to, if we have to toll this bridge to make it happen. We're adding to the cost of that every time for every second we delay. So we have to move. As far as the legislative plan, Ohio passed public-private partnership legislation several years ago. So they have the ability to do it. Every state that borders Kentucky has public-private partnership legislation on the books so that they can find innovative solutions to these problems. Again, Washington's not going to solve this problem for us. The states that are winning the game of economic development, of creating jobs and improving quality of life, are the ones that are solving these transportation and infrastructure problems through innovative solutions. So public-private partnership is one of those innovative solutions, ways to do that, to get the money in early. That helps drive down the cost in the long run. On the tolling side, it has become a very contentious issue in Kentucky. It's interesting. We had to pass some legislation, work on some legislation in partnership with ODOT this past spring, and we had that allowed for the tolling, the nuanced tolling approach, and it was amazing. I would go around and talk to legislators, Republicans, Democrats, cats and dogs, everybody is supportive of it. They said, we've got to solve this problem now, so what do we got to do? Let's go do it. We had, in the Ohio Senate, there were 33 senators. The vote was 33-0 for our legislation. That's 23 Republicans, 10 Democrats. Unanimous. In the House, we had 7 people vote against the legislation, but that was only because there were some folks from Northern Ohio that were upset about the Turnpike deal. Had nothing to do with our thing. But it was bipartisan support, everybody in it together. They've identified the problem, they want to prioritize it, and they want to find a solution. In Kentucky, it's been a really tough slog. We as a community, I spent some time living in Chicago, so I understand tolling. It's part of your daily life, but we don't have that here. In Northern Ohio, we have the Turnpike, so folks are used to that. But we don't have that in this community, so it's new. And change is different, change is hard, nobody likes it. Nobody wants to pay a toll either. You'll never find a poll out there that's ever been taken where somebody's going to say, yeah, I want to pay for something. Everybody, That's never going to happen. You'll never see that. So, but what we have to get to now, though, is that you're paying a toll already as it is. The cost of gasoline, the lost time. I think about, getting home in time to, how much earlier I would have to leave if I lived in Kentucky to get home in time to get my son to soccer practice at 5 o'clock, or missing things like that. So you're paying a toll not only of your treasure, but also of your time. Like any issue, it becomes a pocketbook issue. We have to do a better job of really explaining the economics, explaining that story that you're already paying a toll. And you're probably paying a higher toll than what ODOT and KYTC are contemplating to fund the bridge. But it's going to be an important next step for us. We have to pass public-private partnership legislation in Kentucky in this next session, which starts in January. We also have to have the tools available to toll it, should that be the way that we move forward. I think what we can't do is, again, talk about it, complain about it. What some are willing to do, I think, is sit and wait for Santa Claus to come from Washington and drop a box of cash with $2.6 billion in it. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We have to get to the realities of that. And we have to realize that, again, in order to win the game of improving quality of life and creating jobs, we've got to be innovative and we've got to find local solutions to these issues. Take Texas, for example. That's the number. I used to, my bio, I ran our economic development organization for a short time. Texas is the #1 state right now for jobs. And you know how many toll projects they have going right now? They have 14 toll projects that they've been working on over the last 8 years because they're realizing the problem. There's no money from Washington. I've got to solve this myself, and we're going to find different ways to do it. And they are absolutely winning the game for jobs in the United States. They're #1. So we've got to focus on it. So it's public-private partnership. Doing that helps bring in private dollars, helps drive down the cost of the project, and we have to be able to toll because there absolutely has to be a user fee component to it.
Okay. And so what about the engineering hurdles? Have you had a lot of hurdles? You said you were moving downstream. I know that there were some building issues and things like that at one point. What kind of hurdles have we encountered already, and what do you think is coming?
Like I said, we have finished our engineering efforts, so we have an idea of what we're building. We're at a 30% design. Impacts to the environment right away. In Ohio, we only have about 8 relocations of property, so it's not a whole lot of right-of-way impacts. Some of the biggest impacts we have is probably the Duke substation that's right along the river is impacted, so they've been moving out of the way. But residential relocations are none in Ohio. Sort of the reverse in Kentucky. Kentucky has more residential relocations and less business impacts. We do have, probably the biggest issue that we've had to address are some historic properties that are in the project area, as well as some historic districts that we've had to sort of engineer around to minimize those impacts as best we could. But as I said, those impacts have already been addressed and we know what we're doing. We're working through those. So the next big step for us is getting the legislation in place and moving forward with actual contracting and getting the work started.
Okay. I'd like to open it up if anybody has any questions in the audience. I've got 2. I'm going to pick Mark Rogie first. Sorry, Laurie.
I don't want to put you on the spot. What do you see different this year in the legislature that might make this legislation pass? Is there anything different?
This was not the question I planted with you.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. What's different? The story has changed, that's one thing. I mentioned the safety concerns. We're getting more voices out there for first responders. In fact, we have the former Covington fire chief penned an op-ed talking about just really what it's like to respond to a service call on the Brent Spence Bridge. You've got this much room of wall, you've got 75 feet below you, you've got the river, and you've got cars penned in, you've got cars flying at you as you're trying to at least stop traffic. Safety has been a big issue, and that has absolutely moved the needle, I think, in this community, talking about that we can't play politics with safety of our community. That's one thing that I think has changed from a big picture. I think, as I said, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, whatever other cliche you want to say. It's like a good wine, you got to let it breathe, whatever you want to say. It takes time. You got to kind of, it takes time to get people to yes. As I said, we don't have toll bridges and toll roads here, and so it's new and it's different, and we all like new and different. But it's going to take time to get them there. I think also you've seen some interest from the General Assembly from Northern Kentucky, specifically legislators now wanting to sit down and figure out ways that they can play a role in planning the project, how to solve it, how to get on the scope, the cost. How do I make this work better for my community? So once you've kind of walked through that door, you've already kind of said, well, I'm willing to sit down at the table now and try to figure out how we can make this project better. So just the fact that we're hearing that, I think, has made a big difference. But it's important. We have an absolute sense of urgency. As Stefan said, Governor Beshear and Governor Kasich have absolutely prioritized this project. Governor Beshear is term limited out. He will be out of office next December. And in Kentucky, he's been our biggest champion for the project. So he will continue to be that champion. We've been meeting with them. They're fully on board. But we have to do it. We have to do it now. And I think people are seeing we're not just talking about safety and, this could happen. These things are actually happening on the bridge. We've got cars flipping from one deck to the other. How in the world did nobody, how did everybody walk from that? And how did that not end up, the car end up in the river or whatever? So the safety part, and then we've got, I think as the idea breeds, we've got legislators who are willing to really want to sit down and make the project better. They're getting it.
Laurie, you're next.
I've got a question that may not be very popular. I'm sure you guys have been addressing this too. Have you taken a look at how expanding the light rail system might take some of the congestion off the bridge?
I think I don't know that that's within the scope of what the chamber would look at. I mean, we want, from an infrastructure perspective, we want more of everything, right? Because we need everything. I think the #1 transportation project is actually Columbia Parkway, because I live in Anderson Township and it's backed up every day. So that's just a personal thing. So, but we want more of everything from an infrastructure perspective. I think, Stefan could talk more about cost. One of the other things I would say, though, that's critical about the bridge is that the commerce that goes across that every day. It's $1 billion in freight every day that crosses that bridge. I don't know that you can, so we need to be able to move trucks. We need to have that. We need added capacity as well as what light rail or another solution.
Jeff?
I was going to,
sorry.
on the light rail issue, we can't afford it.
I don't know if we can afford not to have it.
I think we're in a situation where we've never needed it more, and we've never been in a worse situation to try to pay for it. The simple fact is, if you want to build out a regional light rail system, you're talking about a project that would dwarf the cost of the Brent Spence Bridge. And there is no money to pay for that either. If you can't have the most expensive, and maybe, from our perspective, maybe the best solution, you've got to go to those solutions you can afford to reduce congestion, to lower the economic impact. And the Brent Spence Bridge is a way to start. There are other projects, Martin Luther King Interchange on 71, which is going to be under construction very shortly. We're looking at a new east-west roadway in northern Kentucky to help take some of the congestion off 275. So there are other projects that are far less expensive, unfortunately far less sexy than light rail. Because everybody would love to get on a train and sip chai tea while they're reading a good book going to and from work. But we just simply don't have the money, and that's where we're stuck.
Hey, just real quick to add, from the Brent Spence perspective, as well as our 75 projects that are under construction now, and Mark will probably chime in a little bit more, but back in 2004, OKI and MURPC did a study of the 75 corridor through Dayton. The results of that were a highway component, added capacity, interchange reconstruction, as well as a mass transit component. Both solutions have to come online eventually. As Mark mentioned, funding-wise, the fuel taxes and the methodology we have are more in line. So what we're building with the Brent Spence is really the highway component of that long-range plan. If you look at the Brent Spence website, you look at our drawings, and out there you'll see that the regional rail corridors, the light transit corridors that have been identified are all shown, not only in the Brent Spence, but our other 75 projects too. The work that we're doing is not going to preclude those from coming online at some point, but it has to be part of the solution, not the solution.
Jeff, you had some?
Just wondering, how do you physically collect the data for billing people? Is it like a license plate reader type situation? And is that part of the controversy with legislatures not wanting to present this because like big brother government is that part of the thinking?
Maybe I can talk the technical part first. Yes, the plan with all electronic tolling, the plan is to use video license plate capture for those that don't have a transponder, an easy pass type system. You know, the hope is that 70–80% have that transponder. It's not just people that live in Ohio or Kentucky will be able to read, people that are traveling through that have that transponder from another state. So there's a lot of intergovernment, interoperation type work that still has to get done, but allows us to read that transponder from others. The license plate capture essentially would start out as like a monthly invoice, just like a utility bill. You get a bill in the mail, hey, here's how much you owe in your toll. You don't pay, then you get a second invoice that says, hey, here's your toll plus your service fee of X number of dollars. The third time it becomes a summons. It goes on like what I've been told is more of a parking fine. So when you go to renew your license, then you'll be prevented. So it would hit that way. Sure, the big brother issue with the video capture is out there. That's something that needs to be understood. Ohio, maybe I can talk about this because it's more legislative side, but Ohio did pass the legislation that Ohio recently passed not too many months ago. Gave Ohio the ability to do license plate capture, and there were some restrictions put in that
To
bill.
capture the data, but it was very narrow to your question. When we were working through the bill with ODOT and stakeholders and the legislature, that was a question, was, what are we going to be doing with this data? So, and to get the legislation to a point where we would get the consensus that we needed, that was an issue that had to be solved. So I don't have the code in front of me, but basically what we did was we narrowed it so much so that you could only use the data that's collected for purposes of sending the bill. So I think they were very good. ODOT was very good at reaching out to stakeholders who particularly have concerns about privacy. I believe we had the Ohio. I'm looking at Megan. We had the Ohio ACLU was supportive of it as well, and that was a big. So that kind of gets to some of those issues as well. So that was a component of it, and from all accounts, we'll see how it works in practice. But that was attempted to be solved during the process.
I just want to talk about this idea of capturing something and then getting billed. I just attended a tolling conference, believe it or not, they have such things, in San Diego, California. But all these systems, there's an Easy Pass system, and then there's a new system that's in North Carolina, there's a Sunshine Pass in Florida, there's one in Illinois, they're all over the United States. Well, they're all separate systems, okay? So Congress, in the previous transportation bill, said by 2016, all of these have to link together. So if you are billed in California, if you are a resident of Florida, and you're driving through Illinois, and you establish a charge up there on a toll, all of this will be transmitted throughout the system. So no matter where you are, you're still going to be billed. So it just shows you, not just the inner workings, but it shows you how the world is moving towards tolling to pay for these projects. The state of North Carolina has never had a toll, ever in its history. It has 4 tolling projects on the boards right now. So
the whole world is moving towards this, even though there are some issues, I think, with good progress.
Yeah, John?
For the 5-mile stretch in Kentucky, Stephen, what are we talking about as far as access to the new bridge? Are you taking out more of the hill, are we adding lanes?
Yeah, essentially there's additional lanes, not only in Kentucky, but in Ohio as well, on the main interstate. The alignment that comes down through does sort of split, keeps the center line where, the center of the road where it is, and it's a little bit wider on each end, so you take a little bit out of the hill, as well as put some fill in on the cut side. So it does add capacity there. It's about, between the ramps, there's some additional lanes, so I think it's 6-lane section in one direction. I think it's 4 today or 3 today, depending on where you're at.
Last one, because I think we got, Lori, go ahead.
Just real quickly, with the public partnership and the tolls, is it set up sort of like a performance contract where they then in return take a portion of the tolls to pay them back? How's that actually financed on their side?
Well,
They bring the money up front, right?
they do put the money up front, and they get paid back through a revenue stream, and they get paid back through various ways. But the most secure is through a toll, okay? And because the revenue stream to pay back, the private entity is more secure, you drive down the cost of the project, okay? Because they don't have to take as much risk. So it, kind of works logically, it kind of works on the marketplace. You're all the business people, you understand how all that works, right? So it's kind of a market solution. The less risk they take on, the more they can lower the price. This payout's over a number of years. It's not like they're paid back in 7 or 8 years, so it's a long payout.
And the states also have, it's not just you.
Yeah, it's not
You don't just come in and build a roadway and then you walk from it. They have to operate it, they have to maintain it, they have agreements with the states, and the states ultimately, they have to.
They have to do exactly what Stefan tells them to do.
That's right.
What do you think your ROIs would be on
What-
that? Is that
They,
pay back their initial?
yeah, that's some of the effort that's going on right now from the agency perspective. We're basically looking at the traffic and the revenue. We're doing our own forecasting because we'll have to have essentially a shadow bid that we can evaluate whatever comes in from the private sector. There was an initial financial plan that was done back in December of 13 that was required by the Kentucky legislature that the cabinet had to put together. And it was a real initial draft, real quick revenue projection. Out of that effort, there did come some sort of guidance that the states are sort of working towards. It's what the model's called an availability payment, and it sort of goes back to what Mark was saying, is the tolling, in addition to all the other funding that the states will be bringing through bonding or funds will come in and be the finance package. The states have pretty much are heading down the path that they're going to maintain the risk on the revenue. So the tolling component is going to reside with the states. We're not putting that onto the private sector. With that, though, the private sector will be bringing in some funds, and they will get their return in what's called availability payment. So there'll be prescriptive requirements in the contract that says you keep this road in this condition and this availability, then you get this payment over the 35, 40 years of the contract. So that's the method that's sort of leading the way right now, I would say, from just the internal stuff that we're looking at. Now, as far as rate of return, I really don't have the answer of that.
You won't know the rate of return until the deal's done, okay? But here's the interesting thing about rate of return on investment. Because you're talking about a 40-year payout, the rate of return that they seek will be less. Because what it gives them is 40 years of, risk-free, if you will, a steady payment, something that they can build into all their other projections as they do other deals all over the world. So the long-term payment, is going to push down the rate of return that they demand to get into the deal.
Okay, well, thank you very much, all three of you. We will be, for your time, we will be sending you a form to fill out to give us a charity of your choice, and we'll make a donation to the charity of your choice for speaking with us today, for giving us your time today. So thank you very much. I think they'll be up here for a little bit. Everybody give them a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much. And as I said, we will be, our October meeting will be the RCP meeting at Raffles with the Port Authority. So thank you very much. We'll see you soon.